Recently, I've been working with a number of grad students who are in two very specific situations. Some of them are in their first year of their grad program, and this is a time that they're trying to choose an advisor. Others are further along and they've reached a point where they have realized that they have to switch advisors. I know that whole process can be really tricky. It involves a lot of politics. It can be emotionally taxing. And so it's a lot, right? But in both groups, I've noticed a pattern. Many of these students are preparing themselves to settle. They're settling for less than what they deserve. They've said things like, "Oh, I'm just happy to work with anyone who will take me," or "I thought that having a neglectful advisor was the norm." And I want to pause there because that mindset doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from what we've been taught to expect in academia and what we see modeled around us. At the same time, it creates conditions where students accept less support than what they actually need to succeed. So this episode is going to be doing a deeper dive into that topic, the topic of identifying your advisor needs as a grad student. You could talk about it as an extension, or you could consider it as an extension of a former episode. In episode 355, I talked about how to choose an advisor. And in that episode, I shared how when I was preparing for grad school, I was originally taught to focus almost exclusively on research alignment without much guidance on anything else that mattered. This time, I want to expand on it. And the other thing I want to mention is that this episode was also inspired by a question that I received from someone in my grad empowerment coaching circle, my group coaching program for first-gen grad students. And in the circle, this person had a hot seat. So we had dedicated attention for her. She had the spotlight, and she asked, what should she be looking for in an advisor, and how do you know when something is a red flag? So this is a shout out to her. She knows who she is, and to the many clients that I've worked with who are also navigating similar decisions right now. I'm going to help you name your advisor needs in a more clear way so that you can make decisions that support not only your subject area expertise, but also your long-term goals, your mental health, and your well-being. Welcome to the award-winning Grad School Femtoring Podcast, the place where first-generation BIPOC students and professionals can listen in on inclusive grad school stories and gain practical tools for sustainable success. This is Doctora Yvette Martinez-Vu, a certified coach, consultant, author, and speaker. I will be serving as your femtor, providing you with insider knowledge to help you thrive in grad school and beyond. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Grad School Femtoring Podcast. This is your host, Doctora Yvette. Today, I'm going to walk you through how to identify your advisor needs, and I'm going to split it into two parts. And then after I talk about those two parts, I'm going to share some questions that you can ask to get a hold of this information. So first, I'm going to talk about your foundational needs. These are things that you really should have from an advisor. These are your really important needs that you should have met. And then I'm going to talk about additional needs. These would be great to also get from your advisor, although, again, there's no perfect advisors, so that means some of these you might get from an advisor, and some of these you might also get from other mentors if you can develop a committee or mentors outside of your department or your committee who can also provide some of these needs. So let's start with the foundational needs. And the first thing that I want to say about that is that these are conditions that make it possible for you to make good progress and finish your program. And when these are missing, students will feel stuck, overwhelmed, or get pushed out. And keeping in mind that estimates suggest that roughly 40 to 60% of PhD students don't complete their programs, you want to make sure you have your foundational needs met at minimum. The first need is structure. Oh my goodness. This is why my clients come to me, because they are missing structure. I get that grad school is ambiguous by design, and I get that research will take you in many different directions, but that doesn't mean that you should settle for unclear expectations or confusing standards, because those are the things that are a major source of stress for grad students. Instead, what you need are clear milestones and expectations beyond what's listed in an outdated handbook. That frustrates me when professors say, oh, just download the handbook and take a look at what it says there, and the handbook hasn't been updated in 20 years. Come on now. You also need guidance, breaking down large projects into manageable steps instead of being expected to do this alone. Again, a lot of folks that work with me are working with me because they're missing this. They're missing structure and they don't have support with breaking things down, and they don't know what they don't know. So they need someone like me who has been there, done that, who can let them know what they're missing, which might be something they don't even know to ask for. You also need a shared understanding of what progress looks like and samples of good work, evidence of that progress, so you know what to aim for. Without this, even the most high-achieving students will get lost, or at the very least will lose momentum. Next, you need consistent communication. Oof, this is a big one. Clear communication is so important because it shapes your ability to plan and execute your work. Inconsistent communication, on the other hand, will increase your anxiety and your sense of isolation. To minimize this, you need communication that can look like regular access to your advisor. The frequency is less important as long as it's regular. That's really up to you and them to figure out if you want to meet weekly, bi-weekly, or monthly, and so on. But you want regular access to them. You also want reasonable response times. Oh my goodness, you don't want to be working with someone who takes weeks to get back to you, or who will suddenly go MIA and you have no idea how to reach them. I was actually talking to a client and she was going to ask someone to be her advisor, but she told me how frustrated she was that this person never answered his emails. And I told her, do you really want to be working with someone for the next multiple years of your program who you can't even get a hold of? So it made her rethink what to consider as a priority for the things that she needs met for an advisor. So reasonable response times is what I just said. You also want to have meetings with your advisor that can end with clear next steps. You don't want to leave a meeting more confused than you started. And clear communication also makes a bigger difference than frequent communication. I think a lot of times people mix these up. They think, oh yeah, my advisor's really good at communicating with me because they're emailing them left and right, not recognizing that that person is being harmful to them in those emails. So it's not about necessarily having to have someone who communicates frequently, but it is about having someone who will be clear and who will be supportive every time they do reach out to you. Next, you need actionable feedback. This is where a lot of grad students get stuck. They get stuck when they get feedback and they don't know what to do with it, or the feedback is too much or not enough or too harsh, etc. And feedback is essential, right? This is how you learn to strengthen your research, your writing, your overall craft. And at the same time, you want to make sure that the feedback that you get is timely, specific, usable. That means working with someone who can give you a balance of constructive feedback, but also affirming feedback. And you want someone who can give you an appropriate level of detail for your stage and needs. Again, you don't want too much or not enough. And you're not only looking for critique. This is what I want to say to every advisor out there. If you're a professor listening to this, listen up. I want you to offer feedback that provides guidance and encouragement. And so I want us to ask for this. If you have someone who doesn't do this, you can ask if they can provide feedback that names what you're doing well so that you can keep building on those strengths while you continue to improve the other areas that aren't going so well. Next, you need psychological safety and respect. Grad students need environments where they are respected. You want to work with an advisor who provides a space for you to show up, for you to participate, for you to take risks without being afraid that they're going to shame you, they're going to dismiss you, or they're going to tear you apart. This includes being treated with dignity, having a space to ask questions, receiving feedback that supports your growth instead of, again, just tearing you apart. And this is foundational to your ability to persist. Psychological safety is huge. You also need access to resources and basic mentorship. And I'm not expecting you to find someone who can provide all bells and whistles and who is perfect. Again, there's no such thing. There is no perfect advisor. But I do want you to have an advisor who, at the very least, will provide you with access to funding or access to opportunities, someone who can guide you through navigating each step of the way, and someone who can support you in understanding what's coming next, understanding the hidden curriculum. And this is really important. And I say it's foundational, but really it's foundational for someone who is first generation or for someone who is historically excluded in their program. And then finally, you need someone who will support flexibility. Graduate school is long-term work, and because it takes so long, especially for doctoral programs and even more so for PhD programs, you want someone who can offer flexibility when life happens. So you want someone who can give you realistic expectations, who can be flexible when you deal with health or life challenges, and who can support you in rebuilding momentum after one or multiple disruptions. This flexibility can mean the difference between finishing on your own terms or getting pushed out. And we don't want that for you. If you're feeling stuck in grad school or navigating a major professional transition, personalized coaching from a certified coach can make a meaningful difference. I offer one-on-one coaching for first-gen and or BIPOC graduate students and professionals who want structure and compassionate support while working toward important goals. Together, we can create action plans that align with your capacity, your responsibilities, and your long-term vision. Clients often come to coaching when they are preparing for major milestones like qualifying exams, defending a proposal, finishing dissertations, exploring new career paths, or building sustainable systems that work for them. Coaching includes live sessions, voice memo and email support between sessions, and access to a resource library filled with dozens of tools for academic and professional success. If you'd like to explore working together, visit gradschoolfemtoring.com/coaching to learn more and schedule a free consultation today. Okay, now I'm going to transition to what you can expect and what you deserve beyond the foundational stuff, beyond the minimum. Once you have those foundations in place, you can start to think about other things like advocacy and sponsorship. Your advisor has institutional power because of their role, their title, and advisors act as gatekeepers. They gatekeep opportunities like funding, publications, jobs, and that means you want to work with someone who will advocate for you, who will connect you to opportunities, and who will expand your access to resources, opportunities, and so on. All of this will directly impact your career trajectory, and that's why it's so important. You also want someone who can support with your development as a whole professional. And this is an extra thing, right? I didn't put it as a foundational need because I know that a lot of professors work under the assumption that you are also going to become a professor, or at the very least in academia in some way, shape, or form. But I want to also recognize that you deserve mentorship and advising that supports a wide range of professional goals. And again, some professors primarily support academic career paths, and they will stop supporting you as soon as they find out that you're interested in another path. Tell me how I know. But other advisors will support multiple trajectories. And I think this is something that you should be on the lookout for. You deserve guidance aligned with your interests. You deserve support exploring different career paths. Why? Even if your dream is to become a tenure track professor, most people will not land that role. Most people will not get that job, not because they're not qualified. You are more than qualified, but because there's literally not enough jobs out there for everyone to get it. So all these brilliant, exceptional candidates are not getting jobs, and they're personalizing it and making it seem like they didn't do enough when really they went above and beyond and were overqualified, but the job market is just that terrible and didn't work in their favor. So you want someone who can provide you opportunities to explore different careers and opportunities to build transferable skills. And I want to say that your path doesn't have to be the exact same path that your advisor's was. They don't have to mirror each other. You don't need to have an advisor who has direct experience in pursuing a job outside of academia, but you do want to have an advisor who's at least willing to listen and learn with you. You also need alignment with your working style. And this part, I was going back and forth between deciding if this is a foundational need or if this is an added need. And I decided to go with one of the extra needs because I know that we all work in different ways, and it can be really hard to find someone who works in a similar way as us. But if you can, having that alignment in working style can make your entire grad school experience a much more positive one, and it can reduce conflict. That can look like finding someone who offers an advising approach that fits your working style. When I think about this, I think about if you're someone who doesn't want to work after 5 p.m. and you're working with someone who expects you to be in the lab until 9 p.m. every single day or until midnight or until something is done, that's not going to be a good working style match. Or if you are someone that values taking a day or two to respond back to emails instead of being available 24/7, if you're working with someone who expects you to always be responding to them immediately every time they communicate with you, that's not going to be an aligned working style. You also want someone who will be respectful of any other differences. So if you are neurodivergent, if you have chronic illnesses, if you've got other life factors that impact your work, you want to be working with someone who is, at the very least, considerate of your working style. Even if you are having different ways of working, at the very least, they're considerate of that. And I say this because I have worked with a mentor where we have very different working styles, and that mentor works a lot more than I do. But that mentor also has very different circumstances and privileges than I do, and we are both very respectful of those differences. Okay, this is the last one I'm going to mention, and I think this is really important, but it's really hard to find. You want someone who's going to be transparent about power dynamics. Your advisor relationship holds a big elephant in the room, the difference in titles and in power. You deserve to work with someone who will offer you clear expectations around authorship, funding, and expectations. One of the things that I really like is when professors are willing to co-author an article with a grad student, and they encourage the grad student to be the first author on that article because they're there to support their career advancement. And they know that based on their position of power, they don't need another first authorship, but they do want to be able to be a better mentor and advisor to their advisee who is moving up in their career. You also want to work with someone who is honest when they communicate with you, who will recognize that power differential and, again, use it in your favor. Use their privilege to help you out. This transparency about power dynamics and power differences is something that's going to help you to build that trust with your advisor, which is ultimately going to strengthen your relationship with them. To close, I want to leave you with a couple of questions. And these questions are meant to help you to get the answers and to find out how do they work, what kind of structure, communication, advocacy, etc. can this advisor provide. And I recommend really taking a look at the list of foundational needs and the list of the needs that go beyond the minimum and figure out what are your non-negotiables and then pull some of these questions. You don't have to ask professors these questions directly. You can also ask grad students. Maybe it can be a mix. Sometimes you ask grad students who have worked with this professor, and sometimes you can ask the professor directly. So start with a question about structure. You can ask, how do you typically help students break down large projects and track progress over time? That's going to tell you a lot. With communication, you can ask, what does regular communication look like with your advisees or with your advisor? For feedback, you can ask, how and when do you usually provide feedback on student work? With regard to psychological safety, you can ask, how do you support students when they are struggling or feeling stuck? With resources and mentorship, you can ask, what kinds of opportunities or resources do you help your students access? And for thinking about flexibility and a more sustainable pace, you can ask, how do you work with students who need more flexibility or who have changing timelines? For advocacy, you can ask, how do you support your students in accessing opportunities like funding, publications, or jobs? For career development, you can ask, how do you support students who are exploring different career paths outside of the tenure track? For working style, fit, or alignment, you can ask, how would you describe your advising style and how do you adapt to different student needs? And for power and transparency, you can ask, how do you approach conversations around authorship, expectations, and roles in your lab or in your research projects? All right, that was the last question. Now, if you're navigating a decision around choosing an advisor, if you're feeling stuck in your progress, if you're trying to balance multiple priorities without a clear plan, this may be a good time to reach out. I offer one-on-one coaching for those who need focused, individualized support around any high-stakes decisions or milestones. And I also have the group coaching program I mentioned earlier, the Grad Empowerment Coaching Circle, or the GECC. And this is for those that want consistent structure, accountability, and most of all, community as they work toward their long-term goals. Feel free to check out the links in my show notes to learn more. And if you enjoyed this episode, send it to someone who may need this info or leave a review on Apple Podcasts so that others can find this show. That's it for today, and as always, I'll talk to you all next time. Thanks so much for listening. If you liked what you heard, here are 3 ways you can support the show. The first is to make sure you're subscribed and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The second way is to get your copy of my free resource kit linked in my show notes. This kit includes tools, worksheets, and curated podcast playlists to guide you through applying to and navigating grad school. The third way to support my show is by joining my email newsletter, where I share key takeaways and additional resources. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.